Welcome back, ROM hackers. Today we'll be continuing our quest to improve the Generation 5 games. This time I wanted to show you two major upgrades to the battle system, those being adding the fairy typing to the game and adding new moves to the game. Fairy type was originally introduced in Gen 6, however with the help of several contributors, it has been ported back into Gen 5 so we can use it. This is nothing new, as the fairy type's been added to Gen 5 for years now, but some recent developments have made it a lot more accessible so you can add it to your own ROM hack more easily. So today I'm going to walk you through the process as I take these games that didn't have the fairy type originally and make the new type fit in with all the others. First things first, you're going to need to download the latest version of Frost's Gen 5 ROM Editor. Version 3 added a brand new patching system, which is what we're going to use to add the fairy type to the game. Alongside the editor, you'll see this patches folder. Inside of that, you'll see that there's a fairy type patch for each of the games where it's available. The patch was originally created for Black 2 and White 2, and it was later adapted into Black 1. That version does have a few graphical bugs, but it is fully playable. And for the time being, there's no patch for Pokemon White 1. If we open up the editor, we can hit the Apply Patch button and select the patch associated with our ROM type. Now what this patch does is it modifies a bunch of code and data within the game in order to add the 18th type. Keep in mind, if you've already made any code edits to the game, then the patch may not work as expected, but if you're starting with a completely unmodified ROM, then you should be good to go. Now while the fairy type does exist within the game, the patch doesn't automatically add it to the Pokemon it moves, so that's something we're going to have to do ourselves. In the Pokemon editor, this can be done by changing the Pokemon's type in these drop-downs to fairy, and then hitting apply. And then for moves, we can do the same thing with this drop-down here. And if we test it out in game, you can see that Clefairy is now a fairy type, and the move Tackle is now a fairy type move. And for good measure, you can see if I use a fairy type move against a dragon type Pokemon, it is super effective. Of course, it doesn't make sense to add the fairy type so we can just use Tackle. We want to add some new moves to the game, like Moonblast, Dazzling Gleam, or Play Rough. That's where the other part of this patch comes in, which removes the limit on how many moves we can have in the game. Back in the move editor, if you applied the fairy type patch, then you should see this button that says Add Moves. After pressing it, we can open up the move dropdown and see that the list of moves goes all the way down to 999. All of these move slots are now freely available to use however you want. Although there is this section before 680 that says don't use, as the name suggests you're going to want to skip these slots and start with 680. Now we can start changing all the data for this move to match our new move. Here's all the stats for Moonblast, and while it's easy to make the move function the way we want, we also need to make sure the move looks like Moonblast. And that's where this move animation section comes in, which is new to version 3 of the editor. Move animations use a scripting system similar to the one I talked about in a previous video, but luckily the scripts are a lot simpler this time around. A lot of what we're going to be using is these two commands, load SPA and play SPA animation. Each move has an SPA number assigned to it, which defines what animations and particles are associated with the move. What's nice is that the game lets us load any SPA we want within the script. So if we want, we can load multiple SPAs and play them next to each other. So let's try making a new animation for Moonblast. First thing I'm going to do is copy the animation sequence from another move, Moonlight, and paste it onto our Moonblast animation. Moonlight's animation shows the moon rising up and some particle effects. So what we want to do is add a projectile to it, such as the one from Flash Cannon. Looking at Flash Cannon's animation, we can see a lot of commands, but the only ones we need are this Play SPA projectile, as well as the on-hit effects. So what we're going to do is copy these, and paste them somewhere within the Moonblast script. But we don't want to play it right away, so I'm going to add an extra wait command for the projectile. And since this projectile uses SPA 610, we want to make sure we load that too. And now we can see the animation play in battle. So that's all you need to know in order to make use of the fairy type, but there's more I want to talk about regarding the move expansion. The move editor gives you access to some effects like stat changes, healing, or a flinch chance, but there's some effects that can't be edited here. For example, U-turn switching the user out when it hits, or Hex dealing double damage if the target is statused. That's because these effects are actually hard-coded into the game's battle engine. If we wanted to make use of these effects, we'd have to look into the game code ourselves. Just a disclaimer before we continue, what we're about to get into is the raw machine code that makes the game function. Any changes here can completely break the game if you don't know what you're doing. For this video, we're just going to be changing a few values in an array, but I still recommend making backups in case anything goes wrong. In the main editor, we're going to use this dump ROM button. This will allow us to see all the individual files that make up the ROM, including the game's code. Here we want to open up the file with the code that runs during a battle. For Black and White 2, that's going to be overlay 167, and for Black 1, that's going to be overlay 93. And what we're going to do is open up that file in a hex editor. Here what we're looking at is an array that defines the unique effects for various moves. The fairy patch we use places this array at the start of the file so it's easy to find, and it continues down until address 800. Each element in the array contains two values. The first is the ID of the move with a unique effect, and the second is the address of the code that runs for that move. For now, we're not going to worry about what's at that address, but if we copy the address value, we can use the exact same move effect on a different move. Note that each number here is read in hexadecimal and consists of 4 bytes. So 2E02, for example, is actually read as 22E. If you plug that number into the programmer mode on your calculator, you'll get 558, which is the move ID for Fusion Flare. So let's say we want to find the move effect for U-turn and add it to our new move. To do this, we'll look for the entry for U-turn within the array. U-turn has a move ID of 369, which in hexadecimal is 171 or 7101. So let's go back to the top of the array and search for that value. And here it is. So the effect for U-turn is located at this address, so I'll go ahead and copy that down for later. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the array only goes up to address 800, and not every move actually exists within the array. So if you try to search for a move ID and end up somewhere later in the file, that means the move doesn't have a unique effect associated with it. Let's go back down to the end of the array, and we can add a new entry here for our new move. Moonblast had an ID of 680, which translates to 8802. And then we're going to copy the address from U-turn. And from there, we can save the file. Now back in the editor, I can use the load folder button to load the folder with the ROM that we dumped with the file that we just changed. And once that's done, we can go ahead and save the ROM. Now you'll see that after using Moonblast, I'll switch out to another Pokemon. Real quick, in that last clip I noticed that when I used Moonblast, the enemy's animation stopped, and it never started again after the animation finished. That's something we can fix in the move animation script with the freeze sprite command. By setting the first parameter to 16 and the second one to 0, it'll unfreeze the enemy's animation when everything is done. Now just so you know, copying a move's effect won't work for every type of move. For example, trying to use U-turn's code on a status move like Teleport won't work. In order to do that, we would have to get more in depth into how the game's code works, which I don't want to do in this video. But hopefully these instructions are enough to get you started. Feel free to leave a comment if you need help with anything, and be sure to watch my other videos as well. With all that said, good luck, and I'll see you next time.